doke. So what you see in the vise is called a Griffiths Gnat emerger. These are typically tied between size 18 and 24. The one you see in the vise is actually on a 14 size hook, and I'm just doing that so that I can actually show you a few things and keep my fingers out of the way. Excuse me. Especially since it's only 39 degrees in my garage. It makes it a little easier for my hands to work with. But so it's pretty easy to tie. There's really not much to it, as you can see. So typically when these things land in the water, they're going to kind of sit something like this. Or even maybe, if I can get my hands turned around, they might sit something more like this, is kind of what's called a tantrum style. So without further ado, let's get a hook in the vise. Now I'm going to be tying these the same way I would tie it on an 18, but yeah, it'll just be a little easier for me to demonstrate a few things on a 14. So what you see in the vise is a SE1 size 14 lightning strike emerger hook, and you want a heavier wire hook here so that the butt end of the fly actually sits down into the water and breaks the film. Uh-oh. Okay, good. I saved my thread. My thread was about to pop out of my bobbin. Sorry, I'm getting that set back up real fast. I'll do it quickly. There we go. I'm good to go. The thread I'm using is sheer size 14/0 black. Now what we'll do is I'm going to show you a few things. I'll touch on obviously the whole fly, but how you can give kind of a nice little ribbing effect with just across the back, say kind of like a pupa, like a caddis would have, or something like that. So it'll be kind of an easy rib effect. I'll also show you where to tie in 2 different ways of rib, and then we'll cover a few different ways so you can tie in herl for the thorax as well. So we won't just cover a 2-minute fly, because really that's 2 minutes, maybe a little bit short, but 4 minutes is really all this guy takes. So we'll get started. I want to start my thread quite a ways back, and what I want to do here is I want to start this actually in the 3rd position, or a third of the way back of the shank, so that my thread is just before the hook point. And the reason for that is just because we want to keep all this stuff clear. For the head purposes, we're gonna, at the very end, we're gonna, there's a whole bunch of material that gets tied on right here, so we don't want any bulk up front. It just makes it easier if you're first starting out tying. So we'll get just a little ways back, and you can trim out the tag. And for this, you kind of want touching turns. And we're gonna go to about where the barb is. Maybe I should pull that hook up just a little bit so you can kind of see the barb. There you go. So we want to be right about the barb, or pretty close to it. I'm just a little past there, and that's okay. For the tail, or the shuck as it's known, there's different materials that you can use. A common one, I think the original one, was Antron. What I'm going to use for this is some EP fiber. The reason I like to use this is just because it already comes crimped and everything, just like Antron would. The only difference is you get it on a much, well, it's not longer per se, but it's easier to work with, and you can kind of dictate the fibers easier. And they don't, when you do that, they don't mess up the rest of the spool. A lot of times Antron will come on a card or inside of a spool, and if you try to take just a few fibers out, it kind of messes with things, and then whatever. So we're going to start with some EP fiber, and I'm just going to pull some away here. So when I do this, sorry, it was just a little easier to do it in front of the camera. What I'm looking for here is when I grab some and I rotate it and twist it together, it's a little bit smaller or exactly the same size as the hook shank. So that's a little big. So I'm going to take about half of that away. I'm going to get down to something like this. And I'll take it and just kind of rotate it and twist it. And then I can line it up and say, yeah, that's right about the size of the shank, or just a little less, and that's good. So what I want to do here is I'm going to pull out a couple inches and just cut that off. The better you get at this, you won't need to use so much all the time, or you'll be able to use 2 inches and save the rest. What I like to do is I like to actually start with the side that I cut from, so that all my tips are the same. Now the easy way to put this on is just to slide it up underneath your vise, and I'm going to take another turn or two to the back, not the front, and I'm going to start to pull until I get it to the length I want. The length that you typically want excuse me, is about the same length as the hackle. And since you don't have your hackle on yet, you're probably wondering, well, how do I figure that out? Well, you can cut it later if you want. One thing you can do, because you know that your hackle should be about the size of this hook gap right here on an emerger, or just a little bit below, about to where my scissor points are. What you can do is actually take a stiff pair of scissors, open them up, and then kind of use these as a caliper to the fly, and line it up like so, and take that and then just transfer the distance to the back. If you wanted to, you could take a little marker or something and mark one. It gets a little hard to do with something like this though. So I personally, I find the easier way to do that, or to get the length that I need, is to just pull. This is why I needed to use a bigger hook, because my fingers are already in the way. I'm trying to get my hackle pliers here. But I can just grab some of that and pull it down, and that'll show me. And so what I want to do is get 1.5 times the hook gap there. So I can just kind of pull up from there until I get what I want or need. And you can always trim it back a little later if you need to. So don't, oh, now I can't get it out. My fingers aren't working. Don't go stir crazy doing this. I'm just trying to show you a few techniques on how to get it where you want it. And you can cut it too. Again, you can just kind of take your scissors and say, well, here's, let me get my fingers to work. Here's about 1.5 times, and then you can kind of come back and mark it with your fingernail and then trim it off. So there's some options for you on roughly where you want to get this to be. So next, I'm going to jump my thread forward only a time or two, and I want to keep these turns tight going forward. Now, to make this easier, if we're gonna actually use this material and use it for kind of a pupa backing, as it were. So I'm gonna lick my fingers just a little bit, twist that material together, and then I'm just gonna let go. And then you can see what it does is it kind of keeps it together in a clump. So I'm not gonna tie it this way, but I just want to show you, if you wanted to try this, you can now jump your thread. You want to try to keep your segments even, so that some of that material is exposed each time you make a jump, kind of like this. So it kind of gives the representation of segmentation, if that makes sense. And you want to get, 4 or 5 up to the front, so that way when you turn your fly, you've got something similar to that. Another thing you can do is, if you want to actually put a rib in, this is a good point to put a rib in. You can use something like Crystal Flash. Again, just kind of get a little oversized piece, slide it underneath, put an extra turn in, and then once we've tied this all in going forward, you can wrap this going forward and around. I'll leave this in just so you can see that. Another good choice of material, especially if you get down into the smaller flies, like on a size 18 or smaller, is actually just some like Supreme hair, like so. And you do the same thing. You just wrap it underneath, and you keep the two pieces together like this, to use as a rib. And you'd wrap it the same way we'll do the crystal flash here in just a second. So there's some options. So what we want to do here is, and you can start this rib really wherever. It doesn't make much difference on something this small. But we want to keep these turns tight, unless you're going to do the open spiral look with your original shuck material. We want the body to be tight into one color. And so if you're not used to wrapping, especially on the smaller hooks, if you keep your tension tight the whole way, like this, you're going to you see how that material starts to roll on you. It makes it very difficult. So I'm going to show you a way to avoid that. We're going to go a loose turn over, and as I come up the back side, I'm going to tighten down. Loose turn over. As I come around the back side, I'm going to pull down and tighten. And as you do this, it should really keep that material pretty close to the same spot. If it starts to roll on you a little bit, you can simply just take it and push it back on top, loose over, tight underneath and around, loose over, tight underneath and around. And it can take a little practice. But the idea here is that you have a solid color body, especially if you want to do a rib, so that so it's predominant and it sticks out and shows and all that good stuff. If you got one of the material kits for the classes, the rib and the crystal flash are not a part of those, but I wanted to show this as just kind of a flavor of something you can do to excuse me, either test yourself or try to give yourself a little bit different look. So we're just going to tie that off up to the front. All I did was put one wrap on the front side. You can see this part sticking up, and now I can just come right over the top and lay it back down. Now you can put in your rib if you want to, if you got one. And if you do it, try to keep them even segments so that you have 4 or 5 turns, something like that. Pull it to the front side, and now you can tie it off. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and take that out because that's not really a part of what the fly that I'm trying to show is. But again, it's just some options for you if you want to do something a little bit different. So next we're up to the front, and I've got all this material tied in. So if you want to make just this part of the fly, just do the tail, the body, and forget all the rest of that. So we need a hackle. This is a size 14. Now I'm going to have some material up underneath here, and so you want to kind of gauge your hackle size. Again, we're looking for about 1.5 times the size. All we're going to have underneath here is a single strand of peacock herl, which isn't going to add much in diameter. So if you want to downsize your feather by times 1, just meaning that if you were to use a hackle gauge and you gauged a size 14, your hackle, once you have material up underneath in this area here, that size 14 hackle is now all of a sudden going to come down to here instead of being around here. So it's on something like this, it's better to undersize your hackle if possible. It's not a big deal if you don't. So I've prepped my feather here. All I've done is strip some barbs off of both sides of the stem. And on my tie side, or my tie-in side, the side that I'm going to wrap around the hook shank, in this case it's my right side of this feather, you can see I've taken about an extra 1/8 of an inch off. Now what we want to do is I'm going to turn this again to the side so you can see. You can see where that barb is right here. And we don't want that to be trapped. So I'm just going to grab it and pull back until that barb, I can just kind of wiggle it until that barb is not trapped. What's going to happen is if that barb gets trapped, these few barbs are going to kind of splay out and kind of go wonky, and we don't really want that. What we do want is our thread back right at where we started. I'm just going to tie this in on the side with about 3 wraps over. Now you can kind of see how that moved because my threads trapped that one barb. And you can just gently pull that through, or you can cut it out or retie it in. At this point, you're going to see where your stem is. We want the stem to be kind of up on the side. We don't want anything down underneath. The more that's down underneath, the more likely it is that you're going to trap material down there, and then you won't be able to get your tippet through very easy when you're going to fish. So we want to kind of keep everything to the, onto the sides or up. And so with that being on the side, I'm going to come in and take my fingers. I can see where my stem is, and it's kind of lining up with my hook eye. Sorry. And I'm just going to come in and trim that back just a little ways so that it's not in line there. If I were to take my bodkin there, I've got about a bodkin between where the stem is and the hook eye, so my bodkin fits very nicely inside there. Now, the way I like to do it is lift this feather up and place a wrap underneath, around, down and around and over the top, and then wrap that stem in like so. What that does is that really captures the stem. I'm also a big fan of doing like I did on a video where you use that stem as a center line, and you go one to the middle, one to the back, one to the front. That really works well too. Matter of fact, we'll just show that real quick. There's a couple ways you can tie this hackle in. So you can literally just go one turn over the middle, one turn to the back, nice and tight, lots of tension on your bobbin here, one to the front, and you've effectively done the same thing. But then still wrap the loose end forward and then back. Okay. And a little piece of crystal flash hanging out there. You could use crystal flash for the shuck too, or put a piece in there if you wanted. So for doing the thorax here, typically the way I do it, I'm going to show you a couple options on this too, is just tie in a piece of peacock herl, trim off the tips or the tip, and just put a piece of peacock herl in like so and go forward. This is by far the easiest way to do that. If you want to reinforce it a little bit, or you want to make it bulkier, you can actually take one piece of peacock herl, slide it up underneath your thread, just like you did all the other material. Just place a wrap in, work your thread forward to where your head's going to go, which is about a half bodkin width or so behind the eye on this size 14, and you can just start to palmer that forward. Well, that peacock herl became a little frail, so you can do that. You can also, if you want to do something a little different, you can take a couple pieces of peacock herl, there we go, and you can twist them around your thread and then just kind of wrap everything forward. So I cut the tips off. I kind of get those even. There we go. And just put a few wraps in going back. And now you can literally just take your fingers and wrap, make a few wraps around your thread. Don't go crazy because you want to be able to take it off. Yeah, sorry man, my fingers are getting cold and I can't, I'm losing feeling on the tension of what I've got. I've been tying here for a few hours, and at some point your fingers get cold. Okay. But you can wrap this around just like so and kind of choke up on your thread. This is actually just like a miniature version of a much larger way that you can do this. And now you just kind of grab your actual thread, wrap everything forward, like so, and now that peacock herl is tied in. I'm not going to go back and do it another way, but any way you do it, you're just going to kind of hold up and tie your peacock herl off, or make your cross wraps over on the upside. Jump your thread to the front and wrap back a little bit to kind of create that little V wedge like I've talked about in so many other videos. It really keeps everything kind of locked in place. So there's a few options on how to do your peacock herl thorax. And you just really want to make sure that's all locked down. Clean this up. You want your thread to end right where the peacock ends up front. Don't have your thread down here to tie off your hackle. It's going to give you fits at minimum. So when we're wrapping this around, you may want to kind of loosen that stem up just a little bit by maneuvering it around. And we can come up and over if it wants to go. May need to put a bodkin in the back or a finger just to kind of help guide it. Something like this. You can also, if you need to, if it's wanting to twist on you, you can kind of bring it out and around and then down, up and over. And if you've got some stuff that's splaying out to the back, don't worry about it. What we're looking for here is 1.5 to 2 full turns behind the herl. And then we're looking for basically 1 turn through the herl. And then coming around, you may have to draw this back with your fingers a little bit, but we want 1 turn right up in the front of the herl. Just like so. We want a little bit of that peacock herl sticking out. Next, I'm going to take my thread. I want to cross over my hackle stem on the top side. Again, we're kind of following that principle that if you lock it in underneath, see all these here that are sticking out? That could be underneath and you can't get to them. It's very difficult to get to them under the eye, so we want to keep that on the top side. And then we can make, another consecutive 3, 4, 5 turns. As this folds down and over, just take your fingers. Don't worry about the stuff sticking out front. We can address that in a minute. Yep. I was going to say pull it to the back and cross over, but it already snapped off. So, there we go. And then we're just going to start winding and wrapping to make our head. Kind of like so. I guess if you wanted to, you could leave this stuff in. An easy way to get rid of not only the stem, which I was going to show you here, but any of this stuff that's sticking out, is use some fingernail clippers. Just make sure you stay off the thread when you do so. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'll rest my fingernail clippers right on the eye and just gently trim. If you've got these little guys sticking out like that, honestly, they're not too big of a deal. What you can do is you're coming around, you can kind of sweep your thread down and around the eye like so to try to get them to move back. And then you can kind of, I don't know if you can see that one. That little guy right there. Now he's kind of to the back. But again, now he's on top, so it's much easier to address and get rid of him. Other than that, that's pretty much all the tricks there are to this. If you can't whip finish this, take a half hitch, do a double half hitch on a half hitch tool or your finger, slide it right into the base of the hackle, and then glue it. Give it 30 seconds, and then you can clip it off. That's probably good enough. But what I like to do here is a wet whip. Again, this is really super easy fly that you can, but you can kind of dress it up. You don't have to go with just the basics of how this one looks here. You can give it it's just some different looks and have fun with it. So I'm gonna do a wet whip. Oop, maybe. And I just kind of loaded that wet whip into a ball until I have kind of like a nice little head. Pull tight, and you can literally just use your fingernail and snap this thread off. It's so fine. One other thing too is if your thread is starting to slide down over your eye before you cut your thread or pull your thread off, take your nails and try to scooch that thread back as your glue's drying so that it catches. That can help too, but you can literally just do something like this and your thread's off, especially using this much finer thread. So there you go. These don't have to be fancy or flashy. They're very fishable. You can make them durable, you can make them flashy, you can make them fancy. So it's kind of really up to you how you want to go about making these guys. Again, this fly is going to kind of sit typically more along the lines like this in the water, something like that. This heavier hook is going to want to draw it down. This part's going to want to stay up. But there you go. It's the Griffiths Gnat Emerger plus 5 or 6 different things that you can try out to see if you like or if they work for you. And plus, you can take these techniques and use them on other flies too. You don't have to. It's not exclusive to this one. So anyhow, if you liked the video, always glad if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. This particular pattern is a part of our classes over at Fly Tying for Beginners. So if you found this video and you're not part of that and you would like to be, go ahead and come over and check us out. Just make sure you answer the questions, and that's your golden ticket in. Do all kinds of fun stuff over there, like giveaways and classes, and it's a great group. We do Zoom meetings and or Zoom calls where people get on together and talk flies. Sometimes we have people come on and teach things. It's it's good. It's a lot of fun. So make sure you take advantage of that. And other than that, you guys, happy tying, and we'll catch you later. Take care.